Hi, this is Yusef. This video is actually for Paleocrat, and I was told about him by, I believe, a Catholic. Well, this is directly to Paleocrat. I'm going to send it to him, so he might see this. I don't know. He might choose to view this. He might not. The church should be readily acceptable, or God's presence should be readily acceptable here and never have changed or been screwed up. That's the one video that I got a video sent to me. It was made by you, but it wasn't by you. It's somebody who copied and pasted a link. In the video, you mentioned the Eastern Orthodox Church, which will not read the Book of Revelations. And the Book of Revelation said this book cannot be changed, but that's one book. The New Testament is actually a library. And the sealing of the canon never really happened. I mean, when the Orthodox actually, quote-unquote, sealed the canon, it was in reaction to Calvin, or the Reformation, after they heard about Reformation, Counter-Reformation. It's kind of funny. The West introduced new teachings with Augustine, and then had a lot of councils, and then the Pope could just change things overnight. And if you know the history of the Church, you know that councils took about 200-300 years to actually catch on. I mean, right after Council of Nicaea, the world had fallen into Arianism, and it was Athanasius Contra Mundo. You had, I mean, all of these councils. You had the iconoclasm, the appeasement to Islam, then the Second Nicene Council, and then you had iconoclasts come back into power, and then the triumph of Orthodoxy, and all this kind of stuff. So, and then you have the Roman Catholic Church explaining the mysteries, like Thomas Aquinas did with transubstantiation, applying Aristotelian logic to it. You have this all going down through the ages, and even up till, what was it, the 1870s, when the First Vatican Council came about and said the Pope was infallible when speaking ex cathedra. But I think Honorius did that a couple times. He was a Monophysite. There were bishops that opposed that. I think there was an operating bishop, or I don't know, patriarchate, I guess we'd call it, whatever, in France, that was continuing on, not recognizing the Bishop of Rome. It's funny that you go to Sedevacantist, but yet Antioch, which is, I'm Antiochian, Alexandria, Jerusalem, Constantinople, these didn't come in. The four C's in the East were automatically wrong against Rome because they didn't accept innovation to the creed, and well, all this stuff, a lot of stuff leading up from the 4th century to 1054, and then the Pope of Rome saying, "Guess what? I'm Pope of the world." Well, you may be first in love, but if you fall out of apostolic succession, meaning you're not teaching the same thing as every other Christian everywhere else in the world that's always held, it doesn't matter which see you're from, you fall out of apostolic succession. Can't do that. In Rome it changed a lot of things, but due to the language barrier, it wasn't until Photius recognized what was on the door and the church, and he said, what is this filioquate thing? And then the Pope said, you have to believe it. The Eastern Orthodox Church has not changed pretty much anything since the 5th century. Nothing got changed ever. The Book of Revelations is not allowed to be read in church. It's banned from being read in church. Each patriarchate basically has its own canon. Ethiopia has a different canon. The Syriacs different Oriental groups have different canons. The Armenians have the third letter of the Corinthians. But among the Eastern Jews, because there's Eastern and Oriental, you might know that. But why doesn't God come down? Why can't God do this or that? I'm sure that's a question you've asked, and that's a valid reason, a valid concern. It's a valid point. Our ways are higher than your ways. It's not how the Orthodox Church views that, or that verse, or a dismissive of suffering, or anything like that. But then again, we don't believe in original sin. We reject Anselm's innovation on changing ransom theory into penal substitution, where it's feudal lords. And we hold multiple views of the crucifixion because they were always held. I forget that moral influence. Christ being the second Adam, which is recapitulation, which if you read Irenaeus of Lyon, that's in there. A form of ransom theory, but Christ didn't ransom himself for the devil. He ransomed the devil or to God, like Anselm said. No, it was more of like the sponge for sin. The incarnation of God is what's important. I don't hear any Catholics ever. You go to the Catholic Church, they mention the Trinity once. They mention the incarnation maybe no times. And they don't look like the ancient church. I'm just wondering, have you ever been to an Eastern Orthodox church? You may have read about it, may have read Catholic writers about it, but have you ever watched All Saints Monastery's videos, or been to an Eastern Orthodox church? And if nothing got changed since about the 5th century, and the defensive icons, that's just backing up what had already been taught in the church everywhere at all times. And we didn't even change icons at all. Why would you, if you didn't like Rome for the innovations at Vatican II, because that basically, I don't know how that matches with the Council of Trent at all. If a modern Catholic could explain that to me, I'd love to hear how the Second Vatican Council and Trent merged. But if you already see the flaw there, you have to go back to the beginning of them injecting Augustine, of them injecting all these other Western beliefs into the Roman Church. And then you begin to see, okay, it's not until 1050. You can't just go back to 1054 and, oh, that's the break. Just like when the Coptics came back and took over, tried to steal the Patriarchate back, although we still have a guy in Alexandria. That didn't happen at the Council of Chalcedon. It was much later. These guys said, no, we're not going to accept the council, went to the desert, waited there for about, until the rise of Islam, until it took over Egypt. So at least 3 centuries, and then came back and tried to grab, or at least 2 centuries, came back and, grabbed hold of it. So none of these splits, these splits occurred at the time of a council or breaking away. So it just confuses me. I would be disenchanted with the Western Church too. I was. That's why I came to Orthodoxy. But I'm just wondering, it doesn't seem to. I don't know. It does. Why wouldn't you go back to the root? Why wouldn't you go back to Orthodox? This is what I don't understand about Sedevacantists. Why wouldn't you go back to, Augustine started screwing it up in the 4th century, and that's when Rome got off base, but it took a while, just like it took a while for a lot of these other issues to be addressed. And then even after they were addressed, a lot of times they weren't settled. There were some Eastern bishops that tried to go back with Rome, and Mark of Ephesus stood alone and said, screw that. When bishops got back to their hometown, they had their guts cut out. They were hanged, a lot of things like this. I mean, look at the Monophysites. Look how long they reigned. Look how long the Aryans reigned. The Aryans were going a long time. I know that's the reason, apparently the reason why, and the Son, Filioque, was added to the Creed. But why wouldn't you check out the Eastern Church? Any single one of the patriarchates that were older, Antioch is the first place to be where Christians were called Christians. It existed before Rome. Peter and Paul first were. Rome was changing things from the 4th century on. Didn't get till 1054 that the break actually happened. You have to understand huge language barrier, why that didn't happen. Because by the 4th century, nobody, I mean, most people in the East couldn't speak Latin, most people in the West couldn't speak Greek. But I'm just wondering, I mean, we have fully readily available, can walk into the kingdom of heaven, walk into a parish, worship the same worship they do around the throne of God. Not changed one bit. Nothing's explained like, oh, Anselm was going to use feudal dueling logic and explain this, or Thomas Aquinas was going to use Aristotelian logic and explain the Eucharist, and then come up with all these other things. Because if it's not known by everybody, everywhere, at all times, there's no innovations, there's no adding stuff to the faith, new dogmas, and there's nothing new that's been revealed. It's the Eastern Orthodox Church, or the Orthodox Church, because we even recognize the ancient West. Peace to you, may God save Serbia. Just a question, I don't know. I mean, our view of hell is totally, heaven and hell don't exist to us. All souls go back to God, because that's what the crucifixion resurrection did, started pulling everything back to God. That's why nobody's tormented in hell. Their own heart torments them when they're in front of perfect love. You're in the presence of perfect love and truly hating it. That's what the afterlife hell is for you. You're in the presence of God, truly loving it. You're in the presence. That's ecstasy. Like a refining fire either burns away the chaff or refines the dross, and what's being in front of God is. I'm just naming these things in case you don't know about these, but just wondering, why wouldn't you go back to any single one of the ancient patriarchates? Or you might be convinced atheist now through the Orthodox Church. Even if I were to become an atheist, nobody would know the difference, because it's too natural, too beautiful, the church is it's seductive. I love going there. The hymns get in you, and you change. And I can understand being frustrated with the Western Church if that doesn't happen, or when that doesn't happen, or whatever, however you want to phrase it. But check out All Saints Monastery. On here, it's actually an archbishop speaking, so Archbishop Lazar Paulo. So it's not just me, it's not just laity. You can go to you can type in Frank Schaeffer, who converted to Eastern Orthodoxy. I'll send you any links or any videos you want, any questions you want addressed. Take a look into it. Peace to you, may God save Serbia. The church should be readily acceptable, or God's presence should be readily acceptable here and never have changed or been screwed up. That's the one video that I got a video sent to me. It was made by you, but it wasn't by you. It's somebody who copied and pasted a link. In the video, you mentioned the Eastern Orthodox Church, which will not read the Book of Revelations. And the Book of Revelation said this book cannot be changed, but that's one book. The New Testament is actually a library. And the sealing of the canon never really happened. I mean, when the Orthodox Hi, this is Yusef. This video is actually for Paleocrat, and I was told about him by, I believe, a Catholic. Well, this is directly to Paleocrat. I'm going to send it to him, so he might see this. I don't know. He might choose to view this, he might not.